Welcome back to another episode of 40 Facts about the 40k universe. I am your host Gershwan and you are watching One Mind Syndicate. Today we talk about why the Imperium is so fanatical. We're talking about 40 facts about the Imperial cult. The Imperial cult is the official and only state religion of the Imperium of Man. It is devoted to the worship of the God Emperor of mankind as the ascended divinity and savior of humanity. Those who believe in the cult's teachings hold that the Emperor is a living spiritual entity and the only true divinity of humanity. While the ordinary citizen of the Imperium believes that the Emperor has always been venerated as the immortal and omnipotent god of humanity throughout the history of mankind, Imperial historians and the Battle Brothers of the Space Marine chapters know that this was not always the case. At the beginning of the Emperor's Great Crusade in the 31st millennium, the Imperium of Man functioned very differently. First, there was no ecclesiarchy, and the veneration of the Emperor in the form of the cult known as the Lectitio Divinaris was frowned upon and outright condemned by the Emperor himself. The official Imperial doctrine, known as the Imperial Truth, was that the Emperor was an extremely powerful being, the rightful ruler of all mankind, and the perfect physical, mental, and spiritual embodiment of humanity. But no matter how supreme, he was still only a human being. During the Great Crusade, many ordinary imperial citizens found that the light of reason and truth brought by the Emperor was not enough to fulfill their basic human psychological desires, or provide protection from the real supernatural threats that existed in the universe. And so, they took to worshipping him as a deity to fulfill their spiritual needs. During the Great Crusade, many different religious cults appeared throughout the Imperium, worshipping the Emperor of mankind as a god, each with their own subtle variations and differences. These forms of worship appeared first in those primitive planets that had regressed technologically during the Age of Strife. The number of these cults multiplied immensely, with the Emperor's ultimate sacrifice to save mankind from War Master Horus during the Horus Heresy, and his subsequent incarnation upon the Golden Throne, which was hailed as the Emperor's ascension back to full divinity. Most of these cults would gradually fade away, while others prospered, eventually absorbing the weaker ones. The more successful Emperor-worshipping cults spread their form of worship to other planets. The strongest of all the early Imperial cults was the Temple of the Saviour Emperor. This cult had the advantage over the others in that it was based on Terra, and that its leader had been a successful and respected officer of the Imperial Guard, who had fought at the Battle of Terra, defending the heart of the Imperium. This leader had renamed himself Fedicius, and had begun to preach his teachings concerning the divinity of the Emperor to anyone who would listen. The faith spread among the members of the Imperial Guard and the Imperial Navy, but also to the low scribes and minor adepts of the Adeptus Terra. The faith was then spread by these individuals to other planets. When Feticius died at the age of 120 standard Terran years, the temple had more than 1 billion followers on Terra, and an untold faithful throughout the Imperium Segmentum Solar. In the wake of the chaos and anarchy of the Horus Heresy, the Temple of the Saviour Emperor provided a message of hope and reunification throughout a common faith. Cults who rejected were being absorbed, and those who couldn't be absorbed saw themselves being persecuted by fanatical mobs who preferred the Saviour Emperor's theology. Officially, the temple rejected this violence performed in their name. This development culminated in the 32nd millennium, by which time almost 2/3 of the Imperium's population followed the teachings of the Temple of the Saviour Emperor, the exception being the Space Marines, who had never formally acknowledged the divinity of the Emperor, and the Adeptus Mechanicus, who had their own form of worship in the cult of the Machine. After a few hundred years, a single cult known as the Ecclesiarchy was formed from the unification of a number of smaller cults within the Temple of the Saviour Emperor. This cult was recognized as the official state religion of the Imperium. It was granted the official government title of the Adeptus Ministorum, and incorporated into the Adeptus Terra once the High Lords realized how useful the religion could be in protecting, unifying, and energizing the citizens of the Imperium from the myriad dangers of the galaxy. A few centuries later, the Ecclesiarch Venerus II received a seat amongst the High Lords of Terra, and after 300 years, this seat was made permanent. The political power of the ecclesiarchy continued to grow, increasing its hold over the minds and beliefs of the imperial citizens. Those who wouldn't follow its teachings were declared unbelievers and heretics, and on occasion even executed. The vast territories of the Imperium were organized into dioceses, led by the ecclesiarchy cardinals. These powerful religious and political figures were responsible for the missionaries and preachers on hundreds of worlds. Lavishing shrines, impressive temples, and majestic cathedrals dedicated to the God Emperor of mankind were built throughout the Imperium. Millions of religious pilgrims soon began making their way across the galaxy to visit particular important religious locations, such as the worlds where a particular imperial saint had performed their most famous miracle. In time, the sheer number of pilgrims who arrived on certain worlds became an economic activity in itself, and entire planets were dedicated to the worship and direct rule of the Adeptus Ministorum as shrine worlds. Particularly important shrine worlds could become the religious seats of an entire diocese, and so a cardinal world took up residency there. These planets became known as cardinal worlds. The only threat to the ecclesiarchy was the Confederation of Light, based upon the planet Dimomar. This penitent faith's ideals of poverty and humble living clearly contradicted the teachings of the ecclesiarchy, whose view was that sacrifice of wealth and money to the Adeptus Ministorum in taxes, tithes, and other gifts were necessary to enhance the Imperium citizens' access to salvation, and to ensure that the Emperor's light reached corners of the galaxy throughout his missions. The Confederation proved too difficult for the Ministorum agents to infiltrate. The ecclesiarchy turned to violence, supported in their efforts by the unanimous vote of the Senate of the High Lords of Terra, who declared the onset of the First War of Faith, largely to ensure that the imperial stability was not damaged by the emergence of religious plurality. The entire Confederation was declared heretical, and the forces of the Imperial Guard, the Imperial Navy, and thousands of fanatical zealots from the Frateris militia were unleashed upon it. Only a few cells of hidden shrines of the Confederation managed to survive, and the power of the ecclesiarchy over the minds of men, for better or worse, was made concrete. By the end of the 33rd millennium, every imperial world was furnished with its own cathedrals, and the coffers of the ecclesiarchy were filled with the offerings and tithes of the teeming billions of the God Emperor's faithful. This wealth was squandered by building additional, even larger and more lavish churches and cathedrals, and to fund wars of faith, intended not to save the souls of humanity, but to secure the ecclesiarchy's political power and wealth. The age of apostasy in the 36th millennium was one of the most destabilizing events in imperial history after the Horus Heresy, beginning during the long struggle between the ecclesiarchy and the administratum for power over the Imperium. High Lord Vog Vandyre, the 361st Master of the Administratum, was a power-hungry tyrant who eventually gained direct control over the ecclesiarchy. This made him the most powerful individual in the Imperium, and allowed him to place his own rule over even that of the Emperor. His time in power became known as the Reign of Blood, consisting of massive purges of the ecclesiarchy, and the killings and assassinations of countless perceived traitors and conspirators. This period was eventually ended by the ecclesiarch Sebastian Thor's new Confederation of Light, a sect of the imperial cult that sought to end Vogue Vandyre's corruption of imperial theology. The apostasy ultimately resulted in a major reformation of the ecclesiarchy, the creation of the Imperial Inquisition's Ordo Hereticus to police those enemies of the Imperium who lay within its own structures, and the creation of the Adeptus Sororitas to serve as both the ecclesiarchy's new military force and the chamber of militant of the Ordo Hereticus. The cult Imperialis is one of the few common factors that link the separated worlds of the Imperium together. No matter what conditions prevail upon the world within the Imperium, the imperial cult will be found there. The way in which the Emperor is worshipped is numerous. To some he is revered as a distant patriarchal and human figure. Others identify him with such aspects of nature, like a primitive star god, for his agents only visit occasionally, and they descend from the heavens when they do so. All the creeds of the cult agree upon one thing: there is only one emperor. To worship a pantheon of gods, and to put other gods alongside him is heresy. However, there have been many individuals over the millennium who have been seen as saints, people visibly touched by the emperor, and they are venerated all over the Imperium. On densely populated, teeming hive worlds, cathedral complexes can be found occupying entire spires. Most towns will have a church or temple to the emperor, and even the crudest village of the most primitive tribesmen will sport a sacred cave or grove dedicated to his name. The graceful structure of the Emperor's Triumphant, constructed after the Second Armageddon War at Hive Primus on Armageddon, climbs delicately skywards, its main tower nearly a full kilometer in height. The statue of the Emperor at the top brushes the troposphere, looking benignly down upon the seething populated world below. The ecclesiarchy maintains and promotes the cult galaxy-wide, and wherever possible tries to sanction the worship of the emperor, no matter how bizarre it may seem. Very few practices are prescribed, and even such abominations as human sacrifice to the emperor are useful to the Imperium, for it is easy to convince a newly encountered culture that approves of such customs to give up its psychers to the black ships. One of the ecclesiarchy's tasks is to record the multiple ways or traditions with which the emperor is honored. In that way, two preachers from opposite sides of the galaxy will know, no matter what the title or manner of expressing their devotion might be, that neither is a heretic. The ecclesiarchy sends out mission fleets for precisely this purpose, and its flotillas of blessed spacecraft slowly circle a particular part of the galaxy, recording new variants of the cult, and always correcting serious heresies. Some amongst the ecclesiarchy and the Inquisition may argue that men should be more strict in their devotion to him, but though some may be lax in their admiration and may blaspheme or heretically curse the master of mankind for their lot, it is nevertheless rare to meet a man who dares to deny the emperor's divinity. The official position of the ecclesiarchy on the spirits of the deceased is that the emperor judges all faithful humans after death, and if they are worthy, grant them the place in his celestial army. Differing interpretations of the Imperial Creed offer a wide variety of explanations for what happens to those souls deemed unworthy of joining the Emperor's ranks, but who are not so heretical as to be damned outright. Some versions say that they are reborn to try again. Others say that they must wander the afterlife for a time, braving the dangers of the warp as penance for a life ill spent, until their actions have been redeemed. There are also many tales of legendary servants of the Emperor returning from the Imperium to the world of the living when the people of the Imperium once again need them. Some versions of the Imperial Creed refuse to acknowledge the sentience of such entities, referring to them in the technical term such as a post-life warp signature. Regardless of the fine points of the doctrine, the ecclesiarchy does not acknowledge the existence of spirits of the dead. And those were 40 facts about the Imperial Creed. Now please subscribe to the channel because there's going to be a part 2 that's going to go over the different beliefs of the actual Imperial citizens. So we're going to be talking more about the Imperial Creed and what that is like for a daily life. So what does a regular Imperial citizen do to praise the Emperor on a daily basis? So please subscribe to the channel to get that. If you have any other suggestions of like weird off topics of Warhammer 40k that you guys would like to know about, please comment them down below. You guys are way better at picking those topics than me thinking them up. So please comment down below. And seriously guys, thank you for liking, commenting, and sharing. You guys just continue to do that, and it's making the channel awesome. So please remember to hit the like button and share this on Facebook and Twitter. I'll catch you tomorrow. This was Gershwin with One Mind Syndicate, signing out.